with the hashtag Black Lives Matter in football. We are very happy today to have two guests from Ghana, with whom we will be talking about racism and anti-racism in Ghana, as well as more broadly in Africa, and mainly towards African players, especially in European football. Let me first introduce our speakers. So we are here with Mr. Muftawu Nabila Abdulai. He's a sports journalist with the multimedia group Joy FM and Joy News. And he has worked with the Viasat One Broadcasting Network, Quest TV, and ESPN before. Welcome, dear Mr. Nabila.
Thank you. Thank you. A pleasure to be part of your speakers for this afternoon.
Thank you so much. And we are also here with Dr. Bello Bitugu. He's the director of the Sports Directorate at the University of Ghana, Legon. He's an expert in development through sports, which uses the strength and power of sports to address development, all forms of discrimination, including racism and other societal issues. Aside from his responsibility as the director of sports, he also teaches at the University of Ghana and other universities and applied universities in Europe, as well as other projects related to development through sports. He worked on FIFA and UEFA sponsored projects and coordinated European activities serving on the Football Against Racism in Europe FAIR board until 2011. He taught at the University of Innsbruck in Austria for 15 years and coordinated several sports for development projects across Europe and Africa for well over 18 years. From April 2012 to 2013, Dr. Bitugu served as the country manager of Right to Play in Ghana. He serves on many boards and provides consultancy services to numerous organizations, including the United Nations, the AU, the Commonwealth, the European Union, the government of Ghana, Austria, and many other bodies and regional groupings. He's also the chairman of the International Scientific Network on Sports for Development and Peace. He is credited with several publications, interventions, and contributions relating to development through sports, North-North, and South-South dialogue. His passion, expertise, and intervention in the areas of sports, physical activity, wellness, fitness, and addressing all forms of discrimination and exclusion know no bounds. Indeed, a real global actor and expert. Thank you and welcome, Dr. Bitugu.
Thank you. Good day. Welcome to everybody. And thank you for inviting us to participate in this program.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. Dr. Bitugu, would you like to start with your introduction words?
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. When the issue of discrimination, the issue of racism, or the issue of, if you like, stratification, that is, this one is better, that one is not, which all culminate into racism, are things that have been with us all our lives. If you want to understand the perspectives, what you may want to have a look at is, first of all, what is the basis of this terminology, racism? What does it mean? What you are basically talking about is, you are actually talking of something that does not exist, but that's a basis for certain actions to justify or not. Racism is actually that phenomenon where people determine action based on race. But this race does not exist. There is no race. If you look at biology, there is no race, actually. Race is just the construction of the mind of the society. It's a social construct for us to be divided into groups, because if whether I am white, black, woman, or whatever, from Africa, from wherever, if you cut myself out and we bring blood out, there will be no distinction. This is actually a societal construction, but it has come to be accepted in the world such an extent that it is used as a basis to discriminate, to take power away from people, to determine the lives, the future, the fate, etc. of people. So what we realize is people try to use the concept, the social construct of race to determine superiority, how superior they are, to take power, to control resources, to maybe out of the fear of the unknown, to have the powers, the superiority, etc., to be able to determine. That is all what it is about. It is about making the other feel lower and the other feel higher using any determination. And what often happens is this has happened because people have certain complex. That is number one. They have certain complex and they think I have to be better than who I am dealing with. Now I have to show that I come from a superior culture, a superior class, a superior whatever, to tell you that I am better than you. Or simply because of the fear of the unknown. People are always afraid of other things, new things, other people, other persons, so that they will come and take over their power, their position, or whatever, or they think they are so clean, they are so righteous, they are the best. They don't want any mixing. Is the societies in the world are divided based on these social constructions. Now, what you may also want to understand is it is not very straightforward. There are different kinds of ways that these things express themselves, racism and discrimination. There are different ways that they
Sorry, Dr. Bitugu, we are having a connection problem, I think. Can you hear me?
You may write perspective something.
Dr. Bitugu, I think we are.
Yes, I can hear you. There is connection.
There is a connection problem because we cannot hear you very well.
Okay, let me change my position and get back to you.
Okay. In the meantime, Mr. Nabila, would you like to make your opening words?
Thanks everyone for having me. A pleasure to be part of this very important discussion. All over the world, it's extremely essential for people to have a clear understanding about some of the isms that we have in relation to the behavior of people towards others. It's extremely important that
Okay, we are having connection problems with both of our guests, I suppose.
No, Muftawu has muted himself. Muftawu has muted, so you need to check in. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well now.
Muftawu has muted himself. Muftawu, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, he also closed his camera.
Just half a minute.
Muted myself. Apologies there. As I was saying, it's all about the isms of how people tend to behave because they feel that they are more important than others. And it is always one of the key things that affects the mindsets of others. They tend to make others feel inferior whilst they feel more superior. And when that happens, most often what happens is that they tend to discriminate themselves from others. And it is important that we all must note that no matter the color difference of every single person, we are all equal. We are all human beings. We all have, we might have different opportunities, but despite that, we are all equal in terms of our abilities. If you have better opportunities, that does not make you a much better person than the other person. So discrimination is one clear area that must be seriously tackled. When Doctor was speaking, he clearly mentioned about racism. In our parts of the world, because we are all of the same color, our race is the same. So I clearly do not see it from the angle of racism, but I look at it from the angle of discrimination, where as a Ghanaian, I feel I am more Ghanaian than others. Where as a Nigerian, because the person comes from Nigeria, I feel that Ghanaians are superior to Nigerians, or Nigerians feel that they are superior to Ghanaians because they have a larger population. And when we are able to tackle such discrimination that exists amongst us, then we'll be forging towards to building a better society and a better continent for the rest of us. Because if discrimination continues to exist amongst us, then we'll have a very difficult world to live in.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. Nabila. Dr. Bitugu, would you like to continue with your presentation, please? I think we have a connection.
Hello?
Yes.
Did you hear some aspects of the things I was saying earlier?
Yes, yes, of course. The fact that it's a societal issue.
Yeah, okay, fine. So that's right. I'll just go briefly over it. Racism is actually that phenomena where people are divided or categorized into races, and then people use the basis of race to discriminate, to have access to power, to be able to determine over other people. But in actual fact, race biologically is not existent. It doesn't exist. There is no race biologically. It's a social construct. It is a construction of society using other things for us to come up to a point where we can say, this is this race, this is that race, that is it. Now, the reason why many people do that mainly is because of power, because of the feeling of superiority, etc. That is what it is based, so that the access to power and resources are limited and only between and among some categories of people. And often these are done because people have complex, people have the fear of the unknown, and people simply don't feel comfortable about having people who are, so to say, different. But we are saying that what happens within the context of racism actually is something that starts in the society. Now, our main issue that we are discussing today is how it relates to sports now, and football especially. Now, what I would like to mention is racism or discrimination does not start at the football field or in the stadium. Discrimination based on race, a social construct, race, and all the things that happen when you talk of racism, it's not something that started at the football field, but rather something that the people brought along from their societies. When the child grows up in Turkey, in Germany, in Austria, in Poland, in Sweden, the child that didn't know that Black people, Turkish people, Asians, Latin Americans, whites, blacks, blue, are like this, like that, and the rest. It is something that they learn. It is something that they are taught by the society. It is something that they pick up in schools, in the kindergarten, in social clubs, etc. That is where this mentality is. Now, the only difference is on the football field or in the stadium presents a very fertile ground for such discrimination, because people come there, there is anonymity, people don't know who is who. Among the 70, 50, 60, 40,000 people who come to watch games, you say what you want, you do what you want. I mean, you are really under some kind of protection because of the crowd. So people use the football stadium as a ground to unleash, to attack, to bring out those tendencies, because they think it is free, they can get a lot of audience, they will not be attacked, they have what they can do. But you don't have to forget that what they are doing there did not start or does not start from the football stadium. It starts from the society, what the society believes, what the society says, what the society spreads, what the society tries to do. That is what they learn to come and establish that in the stadium. And it takes different forms, from throwing bananas to Black persons, from shouting or talking about, you know, the monkey chants, or preventing players from playing simply because they are from a different country or from a different background, and the kind of media reports that are reported, you know, comparing players with monkeys, with animals, with those who are from Africa. And the little things that they say, well, I told you that these people, this is how they are, the generalization, the prejudice, the stereotyping. These are all things that happen in football. And the most difficult aspect of racism is when it is institutionalized. So everybody is responsible, but nobody is responsible. When the racism is institutionalized, you realize that there is a law, there is a system. For example, I was the first referee in the Tyrolean region of Austria. There were only the famous paragraph 14 of football rules, only a certain number of foreigners are allowed to play, and in other countries as well. Now, if this number are allowed to play, you ask, what was the reason? What is the reason? And they tell you, well, the reason could be anything, but that is the law. So when these things are institutionalized, when they are anchored in the system and they are structural, they become even more difficult to fight. So these basically are the basis. And I will not touch this issue on Ghana and Africa because that is something that will appear later. But what I can tell you is these are the bases, and we can go, when we get to those points, we can tackle them a bit more. So this basically will be my input concerning these aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bitugu. So I'll start with the question for Mr. Nabila, if it's fine with you, so that we can exchange really. So Mr. Nabila, you're a sports journalist, and as sports journalism is a complicated job, we found out that, for example, in Turkey, it becomes also a scene for display of hate speech and ultra masculinity. So I would like to ask you, how do you see your profession, and how do you try to add something, or how is the sports journalism in your context in Ghana?
Well, journalism naturally is not discriminative in itself, but sports journalism generally, when people mention sport, people tend to make it feel like it's more of a men field and not for that of women. So from the Ghanaian context, sports journalism is a male-dominated field, but it is not more of an area for hate speech from the Ghanaian context. It is more of an area that Ghanaian journalists feel have got a responsibility of contributing to the development of sport in the country in general. And as much as we are more dominant in the area of football, and we pay so much attention to football, we have not neglected other disciplines. There are some disciplines, let's say hockey, let's say tennis, they do not have more media attention like the way football or boxing or athletics has. But generally, what I would say about the Ghanaian context in terms of sports journalism is not quite different from what you have in Turkey. It's more of a masculine industry, but there are women within the industry who have broken that glass ceiling and have been some of the key mouthpieces when it comes to sports journalism in Ghana. We can talk about a lady like Rosalind Amor, who is an instrumental figure within the sports journalism area. She's been practicing for the last 24 years. She is revered within the sector. We can talk about someone like Aishetu Ali, very instrumental in pushing the agenda of women's sport. So it is an area that is dominated by men, but women also contribute massively to the industry. We do not see it as an area where we have the platform to promote hate speech, but we see it as an area where we all have a role to contribute to the development of sport in the country in general. However, in every industry you find yourself, there are those bad nuts who once in a while, instead of talking about issues, take on personalities. And that happens very often. There would be an issue that we all must discuss. Let's say, for instance, in 2018, when Tiger IPI and Anas Al-Mayar came out with that investigative piece, DAP number 12, that worked on alleged bribery and match fixing in Ghana football, that there were people who chose not to attend to the issue that was brought out. The issue was about corruption within the industry. The issue was about match fixing within the industry. But people chose to take on personalities. There were others who chastised government for going after the entire football sphere by asking that everything within Ghana football should be brought to a halt because of number 12, and even taking steps to liquidate the Ghana Football Association. The core problem that was brought out was by match fixing. So we should have been working on how to deal with match fixing in Ghana football and tackle corruption. But it is important I make it clear that in as much as it's an area dominated by men, it is not an area where hate speech is promoted. The microphone is the most powerful tool of a journalist. Our ability to write is our other advantage that we have. We should be a voice of promoting unity and development. We shouldn't be a voice of preaching hate amongst the people. One clear thing that most people often talk about is that when the sporting arena has a common voice of preaching, corporate institutions will be willing to invest in the area of sport. And when there's a development and investment in the area of sport, our careers are also devolved because we have opportunities of traveling across the globe to cover matches played by our national teams or events being participated by our various sporting disciplines in the country. And that as media, we have that responsibility of ensuring that that happens. So in the Ghanaian context, in as much as we've got bad nuts amongst us who often take on personality instead of addressing issues, we do not promote hate speech within our context.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that journalists have a big role to play, especially when addressing societal issues such as Dr. Bitugu was describing. Actually, when we look at football players from Ghana who play in Europe, we see how much the public is perceiving them very differently, and that there is no really standardized way of looking at the issue. This is what we can see when we take the examples of Süleyman Muntari and Boateng, which had different approaches to when they were victims of racist attacks, and they took on I mean, Süleyman Muntari was he gave his shirt to a child who was actually
at the
insulting
stadium.
him.
I know why interesting. Just before you complete your question,
Yes,
Dr. Bello touched on something extremely important. He talked about how racism is not one within us. It is a societal issue where we learn. Most children do not grow up hating people. It's because society has made them feel because of their color, they are superior to others. The message Muntari was sending across was that this very child is old enough to be my son or my daughter. And this very child should not be taught on hating others. So that was a gesture to show that the mental approach of people to others is one thing that must change. Sule Muntari's color is not a deficiency. It is a color that is given to him by nature. He's not dark because he's inferior. And your white color doesn't make you a superior person. So Sule Muntari just sent out one clear message that in this world, the society must be taught to appreciate people. And young children must be groomed to change their mental attitude towards others. They should not be taught to feel superior over others, but they should be taught to feel that the world is equal.
yes, exactly. And I think this is through his action, this is really what he tried to do, build a constructive approach and still come with the message of peace. But however, he has been punished for that during the match. When, as if you see at Boateng, what his reaction was more strong and direct reaction, then he saw solidarity from all his team, which is it's a very much double standard. So actually, I'd like to ask to Dr. Bitugu, what does he think about these types of attacks, and how do you think it affects the footballers themselves?
Well, to be very honest, what I think about attacks is what I've already mentioned. I think they are not fair, they are not human, they are unfair. In living in a democracy with the rights of human beings, we have the right to live as human beings. You have no right to take away certain rights of certain people simply because of who and what they are. You don't have that right. So clearly, I know it is not correct. It is not appropriate. It is unacceptable. It is, I hope my internet is not giving trouble, be allowed. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Fine, beautiful. So that is certainly what I think about it. Now, what is going on in terms of the other aspect of your question is the fact that people have decided to use all means. See, some of them come simply because of their ideology. They try to pursue that kind of thing. Some of them also say, apart from the ideology, we should win at all costs. So let us intimidate, let us influence the player so the person cannot bring out his or her best. So these are the impact that it has on the people, on those on the ground. Now, how do they react? I would say that as far as I know, as far as I have seen, I think most of them, is it the Balotellis, is it the Sule Mutari, is it me, myself? I have lived racism so much in Austria when I was refereeing, where people be saying all kinds of things, and I have read and have seen several. My academic work, my practical work are partly on discrimination, and I have seen a lot. I have cataloged the institutionalized part where people from governing bodies like the one we had in England recently come out clearly to say things that are not appropriate, which we can say are in support of this kind of behavior, which must not be accepted at all. So you realize that some of the people can be affected to bring out their best. Some of them can then want to go for a retaliation. Some of them will act in a way when they are provoked, like Sule Mutari or Balotelli, I won't play again, remove my shirt, throw away, or give it to somebody for a particular reason. And they try to provoke these people to act in a way so that they will say, aha, I told you this is the way these kind of people are. So it has also discouraged a lot in that in the stadium, but also outside, because when you feel the way you feel in the thing that you can do best and most in your profession, and you are made to understand that you are not a complete human being, you are not part of the human community, it affects your life, it affects whatever you do, it affects wherever you go. When I was in Europe, the times that I felt the most comfortable was when I came for holidays in Ghana. Even though I was well employed, I was in the academic area, I was teaching in the university, I was doing projects with Austrian Football Association, with international NGOs, with UEFA, with FIFA, and so on and so forth. You are not recognized, you are not seen as Bello Bitugu, as I am speaking now, but you are seen as a Black person with all the stereotypes, with all the prejudices that go with you. And so, you know, when you are doing the best thing that you can do, which is playing football or in sports, and they try to tell you that you are not a complete human being, it affects you. You become very defensive. And that is not the society that we want to have. That is not the kind of things that we want to give people and make people to feel. So that's what I'll give you as the answer to that one.
Thank you
Neil,
very much.
let me just talk about on what
you are muted.
No, we can't hear you.
I've unmuted. Just to top out to what Doctor was saying, I've had the privilege of speaking to some footballers who were racially abused. I've had the privilege of speaking to people who have lived within a community of being discriminated because of their race. I've spoken to someone like the current Deputy Secretary General of CAF, Anthony Bafu, who had a better part of his life in Germany. I've had the privilege of speaking to the Black Stars coach, Ghana national team coach, CK Akono, who had the better part of his life in Germany. Former Black Stars assistant coach, Ibrahim Tanko. All these are people I've spoken to who have lived in areas played football where they were racially abused. What goes through their mind? Dr. clearly mentioned one thing. There are some who use that as an opportunity to prove people wrong. But there are others whom, when it gets to them, it affects their performance. The very moment it affects your performance, you give people the reason to believe that you've not got the quality required of you to be part of this group of people. And it is interesting to note that most of these people I have spoken to who were also able to link me up to speak to others who have experienced racism will let you know that it's always one thing that they are often forced to either react or compose themselves. Sometimes they compose themselves because they are seen as key figures who have influence in the lives of youngsters. And if you're someone who allow your emotions to get the better of you, then you are not sending the right signal across to the next generation of players. As someone who wants to be someone who can impact on the lives of others, it is always important for you to control yourself. But one thing we should notice is that it gets to them so hard to the extent that oftentimes they are forced to either give up or continue. Week in, week out, we watch football, we see players being racially abused, some of them reporting to referees. There are some referees who do things or who react, often calling on clubs to ensure that their spectators behave. There are others who do nothing. Let's go back to 2013 when Calvin Prince Boateng decided to walk off the pitch and he was followed by his teammates at AC Milan. This decisive action that Calvin Prince Boateng took got FIFA to react by setting up the anti-racism committee. Unfortunately, as to what work was done to curb this racism, we cannot clearly tell much. But within a year or two, FIFA disbanded it. I know one person who is a very close friend of mine, Dr. Sam, journalist. He's a journalist. He used to be with the BBC. Osasu, he's a Nigerian. He's also a lawyer. He was a member of the FIFA Anti-Racism Task Force. Every day, he keeps lamenting about how poor FIFA reacted to that very incident of Calvin Prince Boateng and how he had the support of many others. Few have the support of their coaches, their supporters. Others do not have. If you do not get the backing of your technical team, your teammates, then you're left to be alone. And the very moment you're left to be alone, it's extremely very difficult for you to recover and give up your best. Psychologically, it affects them. Some of them, it pushes them to give up their best. Others, it gets them drop their head. And that often affects them massively.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nabila. It's a lot of responsibility, and it's a huge task, and it also gets into the question of what is fair play? Why should some people be subjected to such unfair treatment, and on top of it have the whole responsibility, like to change the society and change the approach of the public, and it's I think it's really a lot. So Dr. Bitugu, can you tell us about mechanisms that exist, that are in place, and for solidarity and for the protection of players who are abused racially, and what do you think could be solutions? What do you think could work to help towards tackling these issues? Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I've muted. You can hear me now, I think. Neil, you can hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Neil, can you hear me? Okay, fantastic. Right. You see, I have to be very honest with you that discrimination, inequality, so far as there are human societies, will never end. No, it won't. discrimination and inequality have been with us for some time, since time immemorial. But it doesn't mean that we cannot work towards reducing it to the barest minimum. The way our society should lead to such things that happen, because people use construct to guide themselves, and people put themselves only in the middle. So it will never end. However, we can reduce them. And one of the most effective ways of reducing such things is awareness creation, education. And when I got the invitation about your project, I don't have much time, and but I thought, no, this is very good. This is going to the grassroots. This is an awareness program. This is creating awareness. And I was one of those who decided about this grassroots project, which you are benefiting from now. When I was with FAIR, I was one of those who agreed that these are some of the things that we need to do for small organizations in all UEFA members to do. And I am happy to see that it is still going on, even so many years after I've even left Europe, that my legacy, the legacy I've contributed, it is still working. So we need to work in our small families, in the schools, in the kindergarten, and create such awareness. Because as I said earlier, what happens in the stadium is the reflection of what happens in the society. It is something that is carried on. It is something that is taken up and transferred in the stadium. So if you want to tackle it, yes, you can work on it in the stadium, but the best place you can start will be from the homes, from the schools, creating awareness on these issues. That is number one. Number two, I think it is also very important that organizations can work on this. Civil society, NGOs like you, what you are doing, like what FAIR is doing, like what Fair Play in Vienna is doing, and like what so many organizations are also doing. These things need to be done and to be strengthened. The other aspect that I think need to be done is where governments who own institutions can think through and say, no, you don't do that. There must be strong laws that protect the minority and those things that we call discrimination, so that the institutionalization of discrimination, racism, etc. will reduce. I think the fan groups of the various teams must also work towards that. There are right extremist groups who are fans, there are left groups, there are center groups, there are neutral groups, and these fan groups, we must work with them. UEFA must work with them, the Turkish Football Association, or whichever football association it is, the governing bodies, the FIFA must make it strict, but they are not making it strict. What is, for example, a player discrimination, racism, when whole national government details? Yeah, the only thing that is nothing. When they pick very well for them not to do such things. But if I am earning 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 euros a month, and then I misbehave and you charge me 5 or 10,000, this is no big deal. It is something I can easily afford and pay. So the punishment must be there, and the will, sometimes with the FAs, we realize that they don't have much willpower to do what they are supposed to do. That is something that needs to be done. They must understand that discrimination and racism have no place in society, less alone in sports. So they must, the way they address the way they try to develop the program, that is the same for football. That is the same way they should do. And there must be awareness creation, north-south dialogue like you are doing with us from the north and from the south. We are conversing, we are discussing. This is very good. Stadium action, fund programs, awareness creation, a de-institutionalization of such things. These are the kind of things I think can be addressed this issue. Just briefly, just very briefly, well, you realize that sports and football they were used as political weapons more against the colonialists to fight towards the independence, because that was the only place that they could freely mix. And if you live out South Africa, perhaps, and you live out some Maghreb countries, the North Africans, and South Africa in the past, maybe, there is hardly something that you say is based on this social construct of race. It is more on religion, on ethnicity, on where you come from, and that is the problem that we have. And in Ghana, you do see some clubs which say, I belong to this region, I belong to this person. There is one club called Kumasi Asante Kotoko, where it tells you they are from the Ashantis, for example. Yeah?
The Ashanti Kingdom.
There are some clubs which say, we are the Northern Stars, we are the Southern Stars, we are the Voters and Leaning. But to be right. So there are things like these that are happening in African football, but the race which is on anyway a social contract does not exist in that sense of the word, apart from maybe these two regions that I have spoken to about. So and we have more different issues. There is issue of sexism, of ladies getting the access, and of getting maybe getting the development away from rural areas in urban areas, the differences in development and the rest. These are the issues that we have and the rest in terms of just touching a little bit on those aspects. So Neil, thank you very much. I hope I haven't gone beyond what you wanted to hear from me. Neil, I'm okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bitugu, and thank you for also answering what I wanted to touch upon, because it's true that we have 7 minutes left now, but actually, Mr. Nabila, I wanted to also try to tackle with you the issue of older footballers that are not so much famous. Maybe they didn't become celebrities, and yes, their sufferings is not so much visible, but might be in some cases even higher because of this harsh reality that there is human trafficking in football, and especially from African players towards Europe, and it is a big issue. So I wanted to ask you if, as a journalist, you're following also this type of events with more amateur footballers, and what is happening in that sphere. Can you tell us a bit about that, please?
That is an extremely difficult question for me to be able to answer with data, because most of these things are done at the blind side of even the parents of most of these young children. It is not just Europe or Asia, but it also happens even in the African continent, where most at times, most players are deceived by agents and flown to other countries, and unfortunately, they are struck with the reality of nothing existing when they get to those areas they've been taken to. So it's extremely difficult to have a data on players who have been, say, taken out of the country, very young players who have not made it to the limelight. But one clear thing I can talk about is that there are most youngsters who, when they're transferred, because FIFA is able to capture their system, for those players, it's extremely easy for you to track the movement of the player from club A to club B. But players have left the shores of the country unbeknownst to their parents, unbeknownst to their agents, unbeknownst to their clubs. And that is very worrying. Most players believe that any place outside the shores of Ghana is a better place. And it is interesting to note that most of these players, when they travel beyond the shores of the country, whatever is given to them is pittance. Taxes alone is often even more than what these players were earning in their very own country. So it's extremely difficult to have a clear understanding of why most of these players fall for these deceptive acts by agents. But one clear thing one can always look at and talk about is why most of these players feel that anything outside the shores of the country is a good one. It is not just Ghana, it is in most sub-Saharan African countries. And this happens because the economy does not support the development of the sport in the country. The economy, unfortunately, is not centered on talents. It is centered on other areas outside talents. And if there's no investment within the area of football, it's extremely difficult to have a clear understanding of why these players do these things. So like I said, I do not have a data on how players have been taken outside the country and my ability to track them. But what I do know is that it happens, and it is a worrying situation that the Ghana Football Association, not just Ghana Football Association, but federations globally must tackle. Go to the grassroots. Most younger players, FIFA have a cutoff age for players to be taken away from their parents. If you're taking a player, let's say from Ghana to say Spain, Turkey, Italy, and that player is not up to 18 years, then unless of course you want to relocate with the player's parents to go and take care of their ward. But most of these things, let me cite one example. Thomas Partey really completed a move to Arsenal. When Thomas left Ghana, his club never knew. His parents never knew where he went to. And that is clearly worrying until he made it in Atletico Madrid and he was caught by the media and put in the limelight because of his talent. No one would have known where he was taken to. And this is one clear thing Thomas Partey himself has spoken about, that when he left Ghana, even his parents didn't know. The club he was with, Tema Youth Football Club, did not know. So it is worrying. It is a worrying situation. And I think that FIFA must work on it. Member associations of FIFA must work on it to ensure that young talents are not tapped at the disadvantage of clubs who have invested in their development. If you invest in a player, you should be able to recoup from the player. But if the player is stolen away, like I cited the example of Thomas Partey, it's really going to be very, very difficult. If these players were not stolen, it would be extremely easy to track them. But because they're taken at the blind side of the media, they're taken at the blind side of their parents and clubs, it's difficult for me to provide data on this phenomenon. But it is one thing that exists.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nabila. I think we just lost Dr. Bitugu. We are approaching the end. Do you have closing words? Something important you would like to add to this very serious and precious conversation, Mr. Nabila?
Yes. What I would add is that we've talked about a plethora of issues ranging from discrimination, ranging from racism, and how players are tapped away from the continent into other parts of the world. Racism, FIFA must rise to fight it. Doctor mentioned that we cannot do away with it. It is part of society. but we can bring it to the barest minimum with strict measures, strict sanctions. If the game is not equal as preached by FIFA, you will not have the best talents out there. It's not everyone who is psychologically sound that can withstand being discriminated in a game. FIFA must put sanctions in place for teams that continue to racially abuse players. He mentioned about how clubs can make like 60,000, 70,000, and when they go against the rules, they are fined 6,000, 7,000. This is not deterrent enough. We should be able to fine clubs 100,000, 200,000. If they feel the pinch of paying, then they'll be able to control their fans. We cannot do away with it. It is part of society, but we can bring it to a barest minimum. The other thing I would like to touch on before I wrap up is that the continual tapping of players beyond the shores of the continent is one thing that clubs have a responsibility, member associations of FIFA have a responsibility, and FIFA. All these institutions must come together to protect talents. Other than that, there will always be unsuspecting agents out there who claim to be in the interest of these players, but when they take them out there, these players go out there to suffer, and their talent is taken into the doldrums. And finally, I would like to say it's a pleasure to have been invited to be part of the speakers for this all-important conversation. We all have a role to play in ensuring that racism and discrimination in the game of football is a thing of the past. And as much as we cannot do away with it, when we continue to educate people about equality, then we would head it elsewhere. We cannot keep quiet because we say it's part of society and we cannot do about it. We should continue to preach, and at the end, we'll find solutions for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nabila, and thanks to you too for accepting our invitation. Dr. Bitugu, would you like to proceed to your closing words also?
Yes,
before we end our conversation.
Yes, thank you very much. It has been a very productive one. One thing I would like to touch on where Muftawu the fact that development of football in Africa, get the rota to Europe, that is where they polish them, and you in Africa just get maybe 10% of the value, and the whole other thing remains with the receiving system in the north. Poaching of players, sending players outside to go and play can never end. But it has become such a system that because of the nature of the infrastructure and development of football, and because it has become an industry and a business, you realize that all team owners are only looking forward towards selling their players. And that is not good because the player is flown out. It's a little bit different in South Africa, for example, or in some Northern African countries. So you realize that we are losing our talent. The moment the talent comes up, the talent goes to be trained and becomes
I think we have lost Dr. Bitugu again.
He seems to have an issue with internet connection.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very good. I hope this thing can continue.
Dr. Bitugu, we cannot hear you quite well right now.
Okay, since we cannot hear Doc, let me just wrap up on what Doc was saying. The conversation was about teams poaching players. The conversation rather has to do with players being taken away.
Yes.
Without the consent of their clubs and their parents. And this is a phenomenon that has been on since time immemorial.
For now, and in future, can meet again.
Dr. Bitugu, can you repeat?
Hope you can
We cannot hear you. Dr. Bitugu, we are unable to hear you. Okay, so Mr. Nabila, if you want to continue wrapping up, I think just...
Yes, I was saying that the point is not about whether clubs are poaching players. No. For that one, there's absolutely nothing anyone can do about it. If a player wants to leave, you cannot do anything about it. The players want to leave. You cannot force a player against his will. That player would move on to greener pastures. That one is a phenomenon we cannot do anything about. But the most important thing that I mentioned was about our ability to track players who are stolen outside the shores of the country. We cannot continue to accept that it is necessary for clubs to lose their players.
Yeah.
If a player decides to migrate from Ghana to Turkey, it's a prerogative of the player. But if a player is taken away, let's say by an agent who deceived him that he has a better offer elsewhere for the player, and at the end the player missed the reality, is extremely unfortunate. And that is why I was calling on federations across the world. That's why I was calling on FIFA to fight this current phenomenon. Players are the most important tools in the game of football. FIFA is what it is because of players.
Mm-hmm.
Member associations of FIFA exist because of players. If there are no players, these institutions will not exist. No one pays money to go and sit down and watch the FIFA president. People pay money because they want to go and watch footballers chase the football. If they don't chase the football, then there's nothing for anyone to watch. No one will pay to go and sit at the stadium and watch the FIFA president and his members of FIFA council seated for 90 minutes. Players are at the heart of the game, and it is extremely important that they are protected. When they are protected, we have an institution called football that everyone would like to be part of. Other than that, then there's no reason for us to have football in existence. Football is supposed to unite us, not to divide us.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Mr. Nabila, for this closing words. We are at the end of our session right now. Okay, and yes, Dr. Bitugu has left the room. I think he has some problems with his connection. So since we are live streaming, we also thank him a lot for his participation. We'll keep this conversation, but also our struggle against racism in all sports and in all its forms, personally or institutionally. We will continue fighting this. And thank you so much for all your insights and your inputs. All of those are extremely valuable. And thank you for standing with us today. I think...
it was my pleasure to be part of this. Like I mentioned, we all have a responsibility of contributing to an equal society where one will not be feel superior to the other, where another will also feel inferior. With this education, I hope we are able to reach out to a wider audience who would all appreciate the variety that exists in our skin color. My color is not a definition.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Mr. Nabila. And I hope to have a chance to meet you again soon.